Hey there, I'm Tracy Spears, speaker, author, founder of Exceptional Leaders Lab, and head cheerleader for anyone wanting to play bigger. This week, my guest is Jen Bennett, and she is definitely playing big. She's the chief of staff and leads the Transformation Management Office at the University of Tulsa. Just a few things about Jen. She has an extensive experience delivering aspirational and sustainable business results through strategy development and implementation, innovation and transformation leadership, change management and strategic partnerships, business development, service delivery, and operations management. There's a lot of amazingly big words in that. But as I was preparing for this podcast and I started looking through her resume, here are the words that kept popping up over and over: innovative, negotiator, transformational, strategic, stakeholder engagement. So I want to talk to her about all of that today. So I'd like to welcome to the podcast, Jen Bennett. Come on in.
How are you?
I'm so glad to have you. How about that introduction?
That was really good. Yeah, I realized that was right off my resume. I thought, God, that's a lot to live up to. That's really good.
It's so funny to watch people listen to their the tee up on something. So most people are always like a little uncomfortable and grinning, and yet I know I'm underselling them every single time, and you are no exception to that. So I'm excited to talk to you about all the things that make you in your resume, all those words. But tell us first of all where you're sitting. I want the audience to kind of get a sense of where you are and kind of what's going on in your world.
Okay, great. So I worked I worked for a global financial investment company and in the energy industry for about 32 years. And then I retired and I came to University of Tulsa and I taught negotiations, which was like just a world of fun. I walked in, they said, would you like to do this class? I'm like, absolutely. I had 2 master's degrees and I had taught when I was in graduate school, but I'd not done this before. And I thought, I do not know what I'm about to jump into. I've done negotiations for years, so this is going to be fun. And that's kind of a pattern that I have in my life. It's going to be fun. I say yes. I worry about the details later. So there we go. So I asked the dean, so is there a book? And he said, well, you have academic freedom. You can do whatever you want. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun. So I did that. And then I had an opportunity to teach strategy, which I had done corporately also. And I built a class in enterprise risk management, global supply chain type of thing, which has really turned out to be about risk and resilience for a corporation. And then the other one I did was decision application, decision analysis and application. And so I got to create those. From there, I moved into having half of the strategic plan that the university was going through, the implementation side of it, all the academic side working with faculty, and that was a blast. And then I was offered the job to be chief of staff and take over the rest of that. And it has been a really fun ride.
Oh my gosh. So you're sitting right now in the chief of staff office at the University of Tulsa. I love that. And I'm not sure that I understand the shift of you in corporate America, how you end up at the university, as you just described all of that. Were you a person that they went to the corporate world and said, hey, come and teach these things? Tell me a bit more about that.
No, honestly, after I retired, I thought, I have to do something that's fun. And someone said, why don't you teach as an adjunct? Like, great, what's an adjunct? Had no idea. And I had a meeting with the dean, and he said, I love your resume, because it depends on when you went to school and stuff. And so then he just asked me, would you like? And I made a whopping $3,500 to be an adjunct for something that took a bazillion hours to create, and I loved every minute of it. Nice. So one of the things we did is I brought in some. I look at the class as if they were kind of my kids. What is it that I would really want my kids to know when they're entering the workforce? What is it that I wish I had known that I could have done better, had I known earlier? Which is how I shaped the class. And so at one point in the class, I bring in speakers who are either have done multi-million-dollar sales deals. And what does it take to do that? What was the framework of their consideration? Or we do a salary negotiation where people have scripts and they have to actually negotiate their salary and apply the concepts that they've learned. And that was a wonderful opportunity for me because it also made me reflect, so what is it that I did well? And then what is it that was in the literature that I really should have done better? And so then I need to be able to make sure that they know that. And I have several things that I should have known better.
So what's at the top of that list?
Well, one of the lessons that probably took me a couple times to learn is a friend of mine said when we were in a debate, she goes, you don't have to be right. And I thought, well, being right, it's not a have to be. It's like it is or it isn't. There are facts or non-facts. And I was in this meeting where I was sort of a chief of staff for an executive vice president in an energy company, and we did all the commercial stuff. And I come up with this really innovative plan, and I just, in our commercial leadership team, I just described it to everyone I was asked to present, and I got bloodied in that meeting. And oh my gosh, people were upset, and I got grumped at. And what I realized was I was right, and I didn't let other people be successful. And that's what that meant when she said, you don't have to be right. And we teach the same thing in negotiation. How do you leave the negotiation? How do you leave the door with your counterparty? I should have pre-sold all this. What they were worried about is the change that I was suggesting was going to destabilize their power structure, people that they cared about. What did that do about succession planning? A whole bunch of things that were really important to the people who had to help implement it. And I thought, because it was innovative and it was so cool, I just could not wait to share it with them. And they were like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing because you've now introduced a level of risk, which is intolerable. So after I bandaged myself up after that meeting, I went back to each one. I said, let's talk about what the impact of you is of this plan. And 2 weeks later, we came back. Everyone loved it. The plan did not change at all. But I gave the people the respect of collaboration during change. I worried about how were they going to be left in this process, because we all had to be successful or no one could be successful. And that was probably one of my biggest things that took me a couple times to learn, that being right is not the same thing as being effective. Wow. So I need to be able to bring people in on this whole journey. And if it's about me, it's a failure to start with. If it's about this collective good moving forward, where multiple people can be seen to have value in it, that's a really good thing.
So you've already captured, like when the very first time we sat down, you captured the essence of a bit of a conversation where I was like, I'm totally hanging out with you, because that is so hard for people to get and to articulate in a succinct way that you're doing that. I sit across from a lot of CEOs, as you know, and oftentimes there's no value to the buy-in. And it is, well, that doesn't matter. And, I'm here to make decisions and move an organization forward. And as you are stating, it doesn't matter if it's the right thing. If you skip the buy-in, let's just talk for a minute about what happens to a culture when the leader is not seeking that. So you talked a little bit about your seat, but what happens in an organization when the leaders aren't willing to do that? What do you see?
Oh, people just check out. Yeah. It's like, you don't care about me. You don't care about my opinion. I may have a wonderful thing to add, and you're never going to know because I don't feel valued.
That's right. Yeah. And you're never going to know. That's the thing that you miss. You don't just miss people being in a good mood. You miss incredible data points because they're seeing things that you're not, right?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that we do at the university is we have this dry run process before we go in front of the board of trustees. This is the same thing that happens at most corporations. And we have invited multiple stakeholders into the room to see sort of the sausage making, right? So we've got we're doing a dry run, and you just open yourself up for criticisms. What does that mean? That should be instated better. I don't agree with that. And in so doing, the product is better, but we also are creating a culture that says your opinion matters. So both of those things are really good outcomes. It really takes a long time, and it is an exhausting process, but it's worthwhile on both sides.
Agreed. And I think that's one of the hardest parts. As people are moving up in an organization, they're usually promoted because they're producers, right?
Yeah.
They're promoted because they can just get stuff done. And all of a sudden, there's a moment in an organization where you get in a chair where you're like, it doesn't matter how much I can do. First of all, I can't do it all anymore because
Mhm.
I've created that. But if I don't get buy-in, and so I like that when you said risk and resilience of a corporation and organization, that this kind of, let's go down a rabbit hole on that, because it seems like there's a couple of pieces to that. So you said you taught a class in that, correct? Tell me more about that.
This was a lot of fun. So we were doing this global supply chain class, and because you have this freedom, I really morphed it into enterprise risk management. And the most timely topic was, how do you get the vaccine out to an entire nation, and what did that mean in terms of partnerships and supply chain and leadership? And I was really fortunate. I had a soon to retire colonel of the Air Force and a recently retired executive from UPS. And they were my collaborative leads on this. And so we talked about, so how does that actually even happen? How does the government reach out to morph the supply chain? You don't know that this particular COVID's going to happen, but how do you already have these relationships established with these major carriers, and what do these third parties look like? And so we just walked through how what the military can do in partnership with private enterprise. And at this point, they were talking about how UPS and FedEx were so collaborative in this, and there were they're both clearly very strong businesses, but how to pull something like this off, you have to do dry runs and dry runs and dry runs. You have to assume from the government's perspective that something like this is going to happen. So when you do that, what sort of relationships do you have early on? So then we looked at things like, what happened when there are major disruptions or fires, et cetera, with single sources. Well, what sort of relationships do you need with other entities? You have to think about that upfront. Same with regulators. So you build those relationships way before you need those relationships. You establish the culture of partnership way before you need to be a partner. And you may have to be the one who gives first, because when something not good is happening, you need to have those relationships well established. And that was a really, really fun part. I had some wonderful partners in that.
And listen, you're right. It's too late if you start building the relationship in the middle of a crisis, right? And
Absolutely.
yet a lot of people aren't looking ahead. I love relationship maps, which, where you start to think about down the road, who are the people that will be influencers for me, or affected by, or involved in. And I just don't think people spend enough time thinking about that. You are the exception. You definitely think about that. Would you call that your superpower, the strategic piece that you bring to
I do. I really, really like that. In fact, we teach that in negotiations. And when I work with other groups, we actually do a stakeholder map, which becomes an influence map. Along one side, how interested are people, and along the other axis, what is their power. And when you make a quadrant, a 2x2 or 3x3, you can start to map. So how do you need to change your communication style, frequency, cadence, et cetera, with those different groups? Because that's a very thoughtful way of engaging with your stakeholders. Also, when you're thinking about what your general communication plan is, or when you're trying to map from a counterparty's perspective who you're negotiating with, you have to think of who are the groups that are influencing them. This goes back to, and how do you lead people at the end of a relationship or a negotiation? So who do they have to be seen? Who do they want to be seen as successful to? What does success mean? So when you think of those things, you have a suite of opportunities on both sides of what people value. And the brilliance is when you can find something that is really of value to your counterparty that's not very costly to you. That's what you then start to sequence and say, okay, this person needs to feel extremely successful in the eyes of their vice president. Well, what does that look like? Or I mean, it's just a really wonderful in-depth way of looking at being empathetic really towards your counterparty, because you want to lead people to be successful.
Yeah. Well, the book Never Split the Difference. I know.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Tell me what your takeaway was from that book as it relates to this piece of the conversation.
You know, I think that Chris Voss is absolutely brilliant. The thing that actually I've taken away from his work, most quoted by me is his concept of tactical empathy. That's more important to me than the Never Split your difference, because he's asking the question, you know, put your counterparty in your shoes. How is it that you can do what it is that they're asking? To me, that was a really, really powerful way of not ever saying no, but helping someone work with you to a common solution. There are several people who have written similarly about how do you get people involved in problem solving together. But his tactical empathy, I thought, was a really excellent phrase.
Nice. It's been a while since I read that. I remember also thinking that, you know, even the title makes me think, what? And like, you know, when he says, well, I mean, if you're willing to like give up half, or you don't feel very strongly about it to begin with.
That's right.
All of that. And I don't know, it did make me rethink that whole kind of, you know, how you show up in those moments.
Right. It also helps you think when someone says to you, oh, we'll just split the difference. You realize that you're just being moved down the negotiation path to a conclusion that is being managed by somebody else.
Yeah. Sometimes it's easier though, right?
Well, that's what people are hoping, right? Yeah. If you try to buy a car, oh, we'll just move over here and you can just sign the papers. Right.
Yeah, listen, I think that being strategic, being able to remove the emotion from the situation is, I think that's a superpower that a lot of people don't have. And have you watched it go terribly wrong? Is emotion one of the reasons that it
Oh my gosh.
Tell me more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I was in a negotiation once, and it was clear that it wasn't going to come to a conclusion that day. And so I just suggested that we just pause and we'll pick it up again. And my peer was saying, oh my gosh, you know, we've never left a negotiation. And I'm like, it's not going anywhere. People have lives. There's no point in stressing out about things. Let's just bring the whole temperature down. And, you know, when you realize that people like to get up in the morning, do the right thing, you know, have a wonderful family environment, whatever their family definition is. And this is part of their life. It just doesn't define everything who they are. So it goes back to the win-lose. Not everything has to be about winning, or at least winning today. You can win longer, and you can win in the long run by not really, you know, forcing everything to conclude on that moment. It's like if you've ever had a child who's really tired, you know that whatever is going to be concluded is not going to be positive. It's better. So I hope my son never sees this, but the only time he was ever grounded was he was I wouldn't say he was really talking back to me, but he was really cranky about something. And I looked at him and I said, I think that you should go roller skating with your friends right now. Because I realized any other moment, I was probably not going to be as wonderful, warm, and charitable to the most important person in my life. And he looked at me like, okay, I think I'm being grounded, but I get to go play. And we just both agreed that was the better thing. Let's just walk away at this moment.
Nice. Listen, I love that. And I love the idea, though, that, you know, when people give up that they have to be right, as you started the podcast with, and that you said, you know, how can I be a better influencer or be more valuable to the equation? That shifts everything. I heard somebody one time say, everybody you're talking to is 10% right, no matter what. And that kind of shifts me in a way, right? Because then you're looking for the 10% that's right. I don't know. Do you think that's a good strategy?
So I do think acknowledging that your counterparty, peer, or whomever, they have legitimacy of their opinion. And it may take some time for you to be empathetic towards what that is. But if you walk in assuming that someone's wrong, that's not a good way to start, because that person got up that morning. This was their best thought. This is what they're going to be putting forward. Are you being played? Maybe. Does it require some, exploration on your part to understand perspective? Absolutely. In so doing, you learn so much about your negotiation. What is motivating someone to do this? What information do they have that I don't? What is it that I don't understand about this? At least the analytics of that whole process can make you stronger at what you do.
I love that. Do you have a script let's say you walk into a meeting right now and you got somebody that has no self-awareness and they don't care at all what you think, and a compromise is off the table? What do you do?
Well, first of all, if all of that is true, they are not looking for a long-term relationship, because they don't care how they're leaving the counterparty. That is a dictatorial situation. So now I have to think from a power perspective, what does that mean? And to me, this is a really fascinating topic. What is it that gives that person assumed power? Is it that they have power over resources? Can they hire or fire people? Are they well connected to someone so they have power of association? Do they have information that no one else has? There's something that is giving them that view that they are all powerful, or you can just wait them out. So you need to explore from that. What is it that's giving them that thought? And is it legit? If it's not legit, then it doesn't really matter. But they're really saying more about themselves. Like and they may be saying, I actually can't have a debate because I don't know enough about the topic.
Yeah.
That is not an uncommon problem. Or they may be having a really bad day themselves. And so is empathy involved, that you just try to explore, get people to calm down and say, so how's it going today? How's your weekend? Start to be a human being with them. Does that change the conversation?
Which is exactly the last thing you want to do when somebody comes in with that kind of attitude. But yet sometimes you just have to be the one to go first and be human, right?
Yeah, and I will tell you, I'll give you an example of one that I did that, but for really bad reasons. So I was working with someone who was particularly horrible to me. And when I ever had to go meet with them, I'd say to my staff, if I don't come back, this is who I'm going to go see. Tell the police this is where I was. And so I saw their number come up and I'm like, oh, they're going to be yelling about something. And so I picked up the phone and I said, hey, how are you? I hope you had a nice weekend. And they went, Abda. And they were ready for a fight. And the fact that I wasn't fighting changed the entire dynamic. I'm like, wow, I wish I had known that to start with, because before we would get together and be like, this is not going to go well. And so I just decided, sort of like tennis, I was going to change the pace of play. And it really worked to my advantage. I didn't know, I was really being kind of a pain in the butt to try to destabilize, but I didn't realize how effective that was going to be.
I love that. I love the idea of that. And I do think oftentimes people forget to separate. There's you and I having a conversation, but what we're talking about is its own entity. It doesn't define the relationship. And to be able
Absolutely.
to, right? Like,
Absolutely.
I'm stunned at how many people will throw themselves on the floor over something when the issue is really what we're debating. And so creating a little bit of separation. And I do try to do that, try to say, you and I are good. I'm fired up about this. And let's roll around about that. Let's go, let's have a glass of wine when we're done, or let's at least try to connect to the intentions of each other. Because sometimes the impact is different and we have to own that, right? I get that. But I think that where I feel hopeless is when I know somebody's so attached to the outcome that they're not able to be, I'm going to say, they're not able to reduce the emotion. That's super, super tough. So I love some of your strategies that you're talking about to try to reduce that emotion. That's what you did, right? You just neutralized it.
Well, a person I worked with a long time ago, when she'd go into a meeting, if she knew it was going to be a really terrible meeting, and she wanted to maintain some perspective that this is a job and it's a really interesting job, but it doesn't define her. On the inside of her portfolio, she had a picture of her kids. So whenever she felt the need to just like pop somebody in the nose, she'd open it up and be like, oh, everything's fine.
That's right. There's my priority.
That's right.
Yeah. I do think, listen, but I think it also goes back to that preparation and getting connected to bigger picture.
Yes.
We could talk for it's 4 days about all of the way to create the right environment for a successful negotiation.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, there's a lot to it.
Oh, and part of it starts with, I mean, there's really a very strong analytical perspective that says, do I understand what my alternatives are and what the alternatives of my counterparty it will be? Just understanding that gives you a framework within which to work. But I think a lot of people go into this is really more a battle of wills rather than coming to an economic or thematic conclusion that if it's good for me and it's good for the other part, that's great. But it doesn't have to be a win-lose. Win-lose really says, I don't care to do business with you in the future. And how many people, I mean, the business world is small. Do you really want to go that way? If it's not necessary, unless you really have some sort of psychological issue that you're trying to just pound somebody, why waste the energy to do that?
Yeah, I agree.
It's better to have allies for the future.
And yet when you meet that person, even though we don't understand it, we run into them often, right?
Mhm.
And then we get to decide, do we want to stay in that with that connection? And we
Right.
get to choose, right? Interesting. I don't know. I also think about, the temperament piece of this, which some people are wired, I think, to be a little bit more emotional. Some are wired to be a little less emotional, but it is learned. Like you can be, this is a skill, right?
It is.
This is like any other skill, and it's so undervalued, I think, like in the political arena. And I know we're not going to go there, but or maybe I don't know. We'll go wherever you want to go. But like when I think about the skill set, the tools for politicians and for people that are leading big organizations, if they don't have this skill down, it's going to be really tough to get consensus or to lead by alignment, because my way or the highway, I just think has a very very limited effectiveness.
But if they wanted buy-in, they wouldn't start off with my way or the highway. So it's not they're not missing because they're trying.
Yeah,
they never would care to start with. But I do think that managing the emotion in during change is really, really important, and being able to empathize with someone's position can make it much easier for you to be effective, whether it be in negotiation or not. And I can't tell about the political arena, but at the end of the day, people are generally nice. You'll meet a few butt heads. They want to be successful. They want to feel that they're making a difference. They want to have a nice life, however they choose to define that. And this is a part of them. It's not all of them. And so sometimes just trying to pull that back to calm it down becomes pretty important. And I haven't always done that well. That's right. That's right. That's right. Assume good intentions. Perfect.
I have many notes on my computer to remind me, but assume good intentions is one of those, because when something goes so weirdly wrong, it's very easy to start judging. And I don't want to be in the judgment business.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be in the assuming good intentions business. And this is another one. This is my favorite. I'll hold it up. I'll let the mud settle so the water can clear.
Oh, that's really good.
Isn't that good?
I hadn't heard that, but that's really good.
I think about that. Like because I'm going to say not that long ago, I was the person that was still stirring up the mud, but now I know, like when you said earlier, walk out, like it's okay that everybody has a life. Once the mud settles, the next day or an hour later or whatever, you do have some clarity in that you didn't have when it started. And I think that, to let some reaction, I don't know what the term is. I think it's a Buddhist term about between stimulus and reaction. What is that space in between? Do you know the term? So there's a term for that just like, oh my gosh, I'm so triggered and I want to react, but I'm going to let that space happen and hang there for a bit, and in the middle of that space, what's so important is to get curious about it and to get curious about what's happening. And I think you're really, really good at that. I've watched you do that.
The curiosity, that's a wonderful word. I mean, if there is a key to success for people, I really think it's be curious. That's a wonderful, you don't see that enough, even to the extent of, are we solving the right problem? Think bigger than what we're doing now. Because, people get drawn into, here's a question, there's a solution. we may be spending all this time on something that doesn't have a really positive intended, ultimate goal. So being curious why you're doing it, who does it better? It's okay that someone else does it better. How do we incorporate that? Should we incorporate it? Is it the right problem to fix? All that sort of stuff. Think before do.
Yep.
Mm.
I was on a call before we started recording this podcast, and it was somebody that is going through a situation where there's a lot of change happening. They are, it's on one of the teams. And so the team is kind of involving her to say, who's right and who's wrong and all that. And she's like, do you have any words of wisdom? And I'm like, well, what's the outcome you want?
Yes.
And it shifted the entire conversation.
Absolutely.
Right? Because who's right and who's wrong is like 10% of the conversation. What's the outcome? And as we unpacked that, we got to a really great place of talking about, well, let's attach it to the core values of the organization. Let's attach it to the strategic planning. Let's attach it to, what does this team want to be known for? And she said, oh my gosh, this is such a bigger conversation. But if what most people do is they go to the small part of the conversation, and feelings get hurt, and, roadblocks get put up. You've seen a few of those things.
It puts people into a win-lose situation, and you really want to avoid that.
Yeah, agreed. Oh my gosh. So you're in this very big job. You're kind of involved in a little bit of everything. Is this what by the way, was this the job? You're like, oh, I'm retired. I'm going to be an adjunct professor. And like now all of a sudden you're sitting in a very big chair. And what are you thinking so far? What are you, a year into this?
I'm a year into it. I love it. I've done similar things, which would be like strategist and implementation, which is a lot of what this part is. But the theme is really, and this has been helpful to me in my career, is my job is to make as many people successful as possible. And what that looks like is really different. And I like that. So it could be that, should I be a connector? Will this person be stronger at what they do if they know these people? Are there business models that can be helpful? Is it something that I can connect talent with people like you who they need some support in their transition to a new job? So that's a lot of fun. So I become kind of a multiplier, right? So everyone has this talent out there, and if I do my job correctly, I can help people do their jobs better. And so it's just me, which is cool, but I get to help a ton of people out there, and I love that. And when I had larger organizations, it'd be the same thing. It's like, how is it that you can multiply the talent contribution either through talent acceleration or talent augmentation that will be to the benefit of the broader organization? Because it's not just about what I can do other than accelerate contributions of other people. It's a lot of fun.
I have benefited greatly from your talent to do that. And I'm super grateful for our partnership. And when I think about, you do have an ability, you specifically, to see around corners, and the value of somebody that's even thinking about what's around the corner. And yet my favorite part about our interactions has always been the best possible outcome, assuming good intentions, just wanting everybody to, the win-win piece of that. And I think sometimes when people don't dig in a little bit and see that that's really what's happening, they feel like things are happening to them instead of for them. And if you can get in that space to say, oh my gosh, whatever, is being talked about here helps me in another room for sure. Whatever is being talked about here helps me in the next negotiation. And so at the end, I'll say thank you again, but I'm just going to say thank you now for your ability to do that. I think you're the best I've ever seen at it, by the way. And I've seen a lot of people.
Thank you. That is high praise. That is high praise. And I know from the people who I've asked you to help that they have benefited greatly. In fact, I just got an email today about someone who wanted to talk to me about one of the people that you are helping. And they said, unsolicited, they said that they have noticed a significant improvement in their business maturity. And I'm like, that's really cool.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, so you're so in all of these. I mean, you're often, I know, at 10 o'clock still at the office, doing a lot of things. What does work-life balance mean to you now? Like as you sit here, are you working in retirement, so to speak, which is not retirement? Are you working more hours than you've ever worked, less hours, exactly where you want to be? What's that look like for
I
you?
would say, well, first of all, I don't have to commute. That's a huge thing. For the majority of my life, I've had more than an hour's commute twice a day. So that's wonderful. Secondly, I probably work about 70 hours a week, and it's of my choice. So work-life balance is like a really personal thing. So, it almost starts with, how do you want to define your life? So if my definition of my life is the end of with my last breath, what do I want to do or have done, right? I have two awesome kids that I want to create a fun and really interesting life for them, so that they can be huge contributors. And then there's always a financial component that's associated with that. And then me personally, I love being on a vertical learning curve. If I'm not, I get really bored, and I'm not a pleasant person at that point. So I like to be able to take on new things all the time. So my work-life balance is, I know what is important in my life. My kids are important in my life, learning, and being able to develop. So my balance is not a time balance, right? It's emotional balance. So I'm going to put a lot of time into this, but I put a lot of emotion into supporting my children. So it's never like, I've never had to worry about, am I spending too much time at work? Because that's my choice. And I'm not doing this for somebody else's validation of what I'm doing, right? At one point early in my career, I thought I had to be Superwoman. So I had just had my son, and I was up at 2 o'clock in the morning doing laundry, and I'm the only employed person in my family. And so I was putting a ton of hours in it, which I still do. But I thought, there's things I can let go of. Nobody is going to care. And then I was like, I'm just going to outsource anything I can freaking possibly outsource. So grocery shopping, that's lovely since the pandemic. So other people do that. Laundry, to whatever extent I can. We'll work the laundry machine, cleaning, working on the outside, doing anything on the outside. These are all, I am a perfect economic engine, right? So I am part of the economic multiplier of the world. If someone judges me because I'm not going to make a hot meal every night, I've lost that war, and their opinion's not all that important. So I can pull it off for me and for my family, and that's awesome. And I'll tell you my aha moment. So my job had moved to Houston, and my husband decided to stay up here. So I was in Houston with my two kids, and my mom was with me. And it was 10 o'clock at night, and I was grocery shopping. And my daughter, who was 2.5, just had a meltdown. She was just exhausted because I also go to work early. So I just sat on the floor of the grocery store in Houston, holding my daughter, and these people coming, looking at me like, oh, she's not well behaved. And I'm like, and I understood, I'm doing this to her. She's a little girl. She does not need to be in the flipping grocery store at 10 something at night. And so we just sat there, and she cried, and I held her, and my son, who was 5, he's just leaning against me. I'm like, you know what? We're not necessarily doing this part super well, but we're all doing it together. And, we pulled it off. And so she's like, I don't really care. So we decided we're going to go grocery shopping once a week. And if I don't have something, I'll call it in. We probably ate way too many pizzas that were healthy. But the time that I put with them, like, we would play together. We would dance at night together. I can remember my son jumping off the bed with a plastic guitar, singing to Sawyer Brown or whatever it was. Those are the things that mattered to me. Grocery shopping, not so much. I don't even remember the people who we outsourced things to, because they weren't really relevant in the rest of our house. Now, I would say that's not financially the best thing to do, but it was a choice that I was absolutely great with making.
Yeah. Good trade. And I just can picture you sitting in the grocery store, and that was probably like the most calm moment you had that whole week? Just, you got your two kids and you all are just like, it's happening right here.
That's right. And it's like when you look at if you're in judgment of somebody else's life and they're pulling it off, it's just like, way to go. Whatever it's going to take to do, way to go.
I love that, cheering people
The
on.
one thing I did do, or second thing I did do that was really stupid. I thought, I'm going to be super organized about making dinner for my family. Not a great cook, but it's like a chemistry experiment. I can figure it out. So I decided I need to have this whole supply chain thing come through, that we're going to have, that I'd make this sort of meal on one night and this sort of meal on another night. And finally, my son said to me, how many times are we going to have Mexican meatloaf? And I realized that it was kind of out of sync on my schedule. And I was so focused on trying to be the super mom, I just totally blew out the fact that nobody liked it. Get it. Just redefine it. It's fine. Whatever it is, it's not going to be, he laughs at it now. It probably will take him years of counseling to get through, but you pull it off in very different ways, whatever works for your family.
Turns out 52 times a year, son. That's how often we're going to have.
And I think it was 26, but it still wasn't very good.
That's funny. Like, listen, when you look back on all of the shifts, the podcast is Shift Out Loud, and you go, that was a good shift. Maybe not that so much. You're kind of defining some of those. What are some of the highlights for you? Obviously, shifting into the seat you're in now has been a big highlight. Anything that when you look back on and you're like, that was big?
I'd say, oh my gosh, I love this. I love this question. It's like, what inspires change, right? So I think of things that like almost like a dynamic decision tree. So you're at a point and you have a choice. And I can either do this or I can't do this. And I look at the horizon that is on the choice if I say I can do it. And is that fun, exciting? Am I going to learn a lot? Does it do nothing negative to my family, right? But is it going to be do I even know all the cool things I can learn? This is definitely the path not typically taken. There's risk associated with it, but that's okay, because I bet you I can figure it out. And almost always, I'm just like, yes, I don't even know what I'm going to do. Absolutely. I was on a project on the North Slope of Alaska, and they brought me down to Anchorage, and I was interviewed for a job. And they said, there's the job we'd like you to do. Would you like it? Absolutely. I didn't spend one more moment. There was not any time between my ear and my mouth. Just went in and out. I was like, absolutely. And then I walked out going, this will be interesting. Not a clue. And then another time, and I was pregnant with my daughter, and they came up and said, would like you to do this development assignment in commercial. I'm like, absolutely, because I didn't know what backwardated or contango meant. For some reason, I thought that this was critical for me to know, and I was going to take this job, change the trajectory of what I was doing. So I can't say that anything was a bad decision, because it's all being a riot, because I never know the path, what my life would be if I hadn't made those choices. I have always taken the high risk road because it's fun and it's exciting and you learn so much stuff. And at the beginning of every job, I write down the 10 things that I think that I'm going to get out of it. I never am close to the sort of cool things that you learn. Like of the 10, yeah, I probably learned the 10, but there's 5 more things that were way more interesting than that. And so as long as I can financially do it, I do it. Like I've never said, I'm just going to quit. That would be the last thing in the world I'm going to do. But if it's, there's this interesting job in Houston, your husband's not going to go. Okay. My husband's choice is not my employer's problem. So am I going to take it? Yes or no? That's all my choice. I don't even have a discussion with him about that. Yep, absolutely. When I've taken jobs where I traveled quite a bit, and was my personal life anybody else's problem? Absolutely not. My choice. Do I do it or not do it? If I do it, I'm going to be absolutely all in. And every time I've taken the high risk road, and we as a family have just sort of made it work.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, what you're describing though, most people would say, no, he doesn't want to go, I'm staying. And then resentment builds. And then 20 years go by, and then you're divorced. And then you're like, I should have got so there's no, when you look back, there's no resentments in the way you're doing this, right? Is that
I gotta say, when your husband says he's not going to move to Houston and you move with a 2 and a 5-year-old, that's its own other issue. But I mean, people are adult, they can make the decisions they want to make. But absolutely, I have always taken the higher risk route. There's only one job that I didn't take because of circumstance that would have been a really cool life experience. And I got offered a job to work in Singapore. And my son and I just thought, oh, wow, this is going to be awesome. My son was born, and it was a really, really bad circumstance. I'm sure it happens to a lot of women. But he was born, no pulse, no respiration. They crushed his head. So he was going to a pediatric neurologist, and I didn't want to lose that baseline. And I was like, when I was offered the job, absolutely not. And that he was not a risk I was willing to take. And I was fine with that.
Yeah.
And I knew exactly why I didn't do it. I don't regret that at all. I regret that I couldn't take him to something like that because it would have been really cool. But under the circumstances, I own that. It's not a problem.
Oh my gosh. Do you think risk is a muscle? Do you think you can get better at it?
I do. But I realize I'm a fortunate individual in that, I didn't have children until later. So I had created a professional reputation and some financial resources that made it easier to me to take some risk. Earlier this year, my husband was sick, and it's hard to get him into a hospital with all the COVID problems. And he was only about 24 to 48 hours from not making it. And I realized that I was in such a fortunate situation that I had the education and the just the education to manage things through a digital environment, to be able to seek the support, to be able to get them in a hospital. And I was thinking about those people who are 19 years old and have a child, who are exhausted, and how do they navigate the system?
Right.
So I don't think that risk for them is a muscle, because they're in a very different risk tolerant situation. So it is a muscle, but I also have to reflect that I'm extremely fortunate to not have significant downside in some of the risks that I was willing to take.
Well said. So, my gosh, so well said. I want to just continue this conversation. I know we're kind of on the cusp of a couple of other big things, but I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up with just saying this. I think everybody's listening in why I always love hanging out with you. I love our conversation. I never know what they're going to be about, but I always leave learning something and inspired by you. And I appreciate our partnership, and I'm just so excited to see what's next. What for you? Last question. The biggest shift yet to come. What are you most looking forward to? Do you even know what it is yet?
I was going to say, it's the journey that has not yet been defined.
Nice.
Because if I knew it, I'd already be going after it. Because I try to create it in the environment that we have here. University of Tulsa is doing this is going to sound like a commercial, and it's not meant to be.
Do it.
It's doing some amazing things. And I can't wait to see how far it goes. We've got really awesome plans. There's a lot of change. As long as there's a lot of change and there's an ability to drive forward, I love doing that. I'm not a good status quo person. And fortunately, we have leadership at the university who's an excellent, excellent leader. And the university is going to be going places. This is what is fun. But in general, what I like is the fact that I don't know exactly what's coming next. And it's going to be a wild, interesting ride.
Oh my gosh, that's the final word today. Thank you, Jen, so much for taking the time to be on the podcast. I sure appreciate it. If people want to reach you, how can they find you?
I have a very strange email address, but it'd be JSB 8472@utulsa.edu.
Or check her out on LinkedIn. All right, we'll do it again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, my friend.